Hey team, welcome to another Bullpen Bulletin with Coach Hart and Building Better Baseball. Today, this is a question that I get a lot from youth coaches, and it is how do I coach different talent levels on the same team? You have one or a couple players that are really, really good, and then you have a couple players who are just not so good, right? Who they need a lot of work, right? And today is all about how to coach different levels of talent when they're on the same team. So I know it's a very difficult situation and there's a lot of things that go into it and there's a lot of needs that you have to address as a youth coach. So we're going to dive into this topic today in today's Bullpen Bulletin. And again, I'm Coach Hart. This is Building Better Baseball. This is the best place for baseball education. So let's get into the video. So the first thing to remember as a coach is even though all players are different and they have different talent levels, they are all part of your team. And some coaches kind of forget this sometimes, and they sometimes play favorites with the really talented players, and they kind of leave the non so talented players on the kind of like the back burner, and they don't give them as much attention. We have to remember that everyone is part of your team. And the thing that adults remember most is how much fun they had with their team in youth baseball. Every player deserves to have those memories, not just the talented ones. And if we play favorites, that's exactly what's going to happen. The non talented players are going to remember those moments where you or the coaches or parents or whoever, they didn't really give them as much attention as they needed, and everybody put their attention on the talented players, and that's not what we want. And we have to be conscious of word choice when we're speaking to our players. So this really, really goes into kind of like the psychological side of how the kid is responding. When we are addressing the team, we don't want to say more skilled or less skilled or more talented, less talented, right? We don't want to kind of categorize those players in front of them, especially. But even when we're talking to other parents, right? We don't want to categorize these players as like one is better, one is not better, or whatever. So we have to be very conscious of these word choices. And like I said, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I experience it in my PE job all the time where I'm just trying to very carefully choose my words, especially when I'm talking to parents or other kids, where I'm not trying to single out any group of players on one side or the other. So just try to be conscious of your word choice when describing your team as a whole or individual players. And we want to praise in public and critique in private. Last thing to remember, right? We want to praise everybody in public, talented kids, not talented kids, find something they did well, praise them in public in front of the team, and critique in private. If somebody needs some critiquing, pull them off to the side. Don't do it in front of the team. Pull them off to the side and, give them that feedback, not in front of the team. And the next thing is use help. So use your assistant coaches or whoever is helping you. So use them to work with the different kids. And I'll explain what that means. You can have them work with either group of players, the talented players, the non-talented players, the group in the middle, right? But preferably, they will work with the more talented players. And in the next slide, I will go more in depth with this, but just keep this in mind going into the next slide. You want to use hands-off coaching with more talented players and hands-on coaching with less talented players. Now, what this means is obviously the talented players they grasp skills and concepts quicker and faster than the kind of the non-talented players, right? And what we're going to do is hands-off coaching is we are still giving everybody our coaching. That's the strategy, right? You want to give everybody equal amount of coaching, but with the talented players, you're going to give them something to do like a drill or an idea, and you're going to let them kind of orchestrate it themselves or perform it themselves using your assistant coaches as help. So you're going to use them to help the talented players perform those drills, right? So you're still giving the talented players you're coaching, but it's hands off. Like they can kind of handle it themselves. The kind of less talented on the other side, you are going to use hands-on coaching where you are giving them something to do and you are walking them through exactly what to do and helping them with what they need help with. All right. So think of this concept, like I said, of hands-off coaching versus hands-on coaching. And with the kids who are a little more talented, you can use some hands-off coaching, use your assistant coaches to kind of orchestrate and perform those drills, but you can use hands-on coaching for the kind of less talented players or kids who need your help the most. All right. So this is a great idea to kind of handle the different talent levels on your team. And more depth, the idea of more depth. A good rule to follow is the more talent or skill a player has, it's the only thing that is the more depth of coaching they'll need for development. And we want to first identify what you're considering as skill or talent. Who are you comparing them to that puts them in the more talent category, right? So are you comparing them just to the other players on the team, which is fine. Like wherever you're comparing, that's fine. But we have to understand this concept before we move forward, right? So are you comparing them to the other players on your team? Are you comparing them to the other players in the league or the other teams in your league? Are you comparing them to kind of like a bigger pond, right? How big does the pond get where this skillful player that you're deeming as more talented is the smaller fish, right? So that's something to just think about because that kind of puts in perspective of what you need to do for this player. If you have the next like Shohei Ohtani, right, then you're going to treat that kid different because he obviously has all of the talent and all of the skills over anybody, right? Or do you just have a really skillful player that's kind of better than everybody on their team? You're going to approach those players differently with different concepts, right? So first, figure out what you're deeming talented or more skilled and who you're comparing them to. Okay. Now, you can keep your practice plan the same. So all of the drills, practices, everything, keep it the same. But you're going to give players different things to focus on based on the depth of development that they need. So this is where I'm talking about more depth. When a talented player, like depending on talent, a less talented player, they just can't go a little in depth. They can't go too deep into a skill because they haven't mastered the basics yet, right? But if you have a really talented kid who really gets all of the skills and they're really natural athlete or a natural baseball player, then you're just going to go more in depth with that skill that you're teaching in your practice plan. So let's, for example, say we are doing a drill of hitting drills off of the tee, right? With a basic player, you are just going to have them practice their swing and hit off the tee. That is a basic, not deep skill that they're going to be working on because that's where they are. That's what they need, right? And with a more talented player, you might go into more depth of tee drills. So in your practice plan itself, you don't have to change it for all the players. You just have to go more in depth based on what these kids need, right? The more important thing is you want to meet these kids where they are at. Right? You can't meet a kid this far away when they're back here, right? And vice versa. You can't meet a kid here if they're all the way here in development, right? You want to meet them where they're at in their development with depth, right? It just gets more into the details, into the nitty-gritty of the skill, and just go as deep as the kid can understand and as they can practice, okay? So more depth is an easy concept to understand of how you can coach different talent levels. You just go as deep as they are, meet them where they're at, right? So another thing is you could set individual goals and you can make sure all your players stay on track with their development by assigning individual goals to accomplish. So what this does is this allows you to give everyone your coaching time while identifying the specific needs of all of your players. So I'm not saying create 13 different individual goals for 13 players. What I'm saying is that you can group players together as your most skilled, as your middle ground skilled, and as your least skilled. Make 3 different goals and assign them to those groups of players, right? So for example, let's say that your goal is to not make an error, all right? And the most skilled players, let's say that they have to make a goal of like 2 games in a row where they don't make an error in the field, or 3 games in a row, right? Something high end like that. The middle ground players, let's just do 1 game, right? Let's do, hey, your goal is to not make an error in one game, a one full game without an error. And then the least skilled players, let's say they make one error, right? You're allowing them one error and that's the goal. No more than one error or two errors, right? So that's what I'm saying is that you can set individual goals based on the talent level of each individual kid. That would give everybody you're coaching, but also you're identifying all of the needs of your players and you're setting them up for success. I think that's the most important thing is that you're setting them up for success and you're allowing them a chance to succeed based on the goals that you have given. And these can be short or long term, pertaining to individual skills or team oriented skills. So, literally any goal, individual goals, team goals, whatever, right? Any goals and everything we just said, these are the benefits of setting individual goals for each player. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the most important thing when coaching different talent levels is keep the team mindset. Now, one major thing you'll have to remember is to make sure your team sticks with a team mindset and not a me mindset. I always say that, and it's very easy. I actually say this right here is it's easy for talented players to think that they're just better and to have that impact the team's success as a whole. That is the absolute last thing that you want where a talented kid who's much better than everybody else, they just are kind of just not humble, right? And they consider themselves like I'm better than the team, so I'm not necessarily part of the team because I'm just the best kid, right? That is not what you want. And I believe that you can control this as a coach based on going back to the first slide of your word choice of how you praise these different types of players. If these talented players, if you're always saying, dude, you're the king, you rock, you're the best kid on the team, all of these things, that is inflating their ego and that is not helping them be a team player because you as the coach are inflating their ego, right? Which like everybody has a personal ego, right? And if you as the coach are inflating them, it just makes it a little worse, right? And it has the exact opposite effect for the less skilled players where you're inflating this talented kid's ego and then you're not saying anything to these kids and it just creates a huge divide in the team, which is the last thing that you want. All right? So one way that you could avoid doing this is have players teach players. So it's kind of like a peer review, right? A peer assessment. Now you could, like if you have stations, group some talented players and some non-talented players based on your identification of talent and not talent, right? And you could have, if a non-talented kid is struggling, you should encourage the talented kid to kind of coach this other kid and really emphasize to the talented kid that you are creating a better team and your team will be a better team if you help your other players get better, right? And that also instills just everything in the talented player where it instills when you teach something, you learn it better also, right? It kind of solidifies it in yourself when you teach it back to somebody. That's going to help the talented player get even better because they're teaching it, right? But also, it's really solidifying that team mindset where we are only as good as our weakest link, right? And we will be a better team if everybody gets better and everybody lifts up, right? And I can help my teammates out by teaching them the skills. So that's one way that you could do it. Um, the last thing we're going to talk about is you want to keep an eye out for bullying. Okay, so I remember my first time coaching, right? My first couple years coaching, I thought my team was amazing. All of the kids were nice. They were all friends and blah, blah, blah. Turns out that after the season, one of the parents came up to me and said that his one kid was being bullied like the entire season by this other kid, right? It was a talented kid bullying a non-talented kid. And that really just broke my heart. It broke my heart because I was naive to think that it wouldn't happen on my team, right? Oh no, these kids are great. The bullying doesn't happen. It does. It does. And it's when you're not expecting it and it's when you are not there. Right. So if you are doing stations, right, and you're grouping a couple players together and they're out in the outfield doing their center and you're at the T drill, That's the situation where it could happen. So I'm not saying that you can kind of be everywhere at once, but I'm just saying to keep an eye out for it and to kind of check in with your players, right? Especially the non-skilled players where, hey, is everything all right? Like your teammates treating you all right? Like how's the team going, right? Check in with the parents and see if the kid, when they go home after practice, if they talk to their parents, right? Check in with the parents. Do check-ins. Make sure that you are aware of all of the behaviors happening on your team because it happens. I was naive. I didn't think it was going to happen. And come to find out after the season was over, this kid had a horrible, horrible season because he was being bullied the whole time and I didn't do anything about it. Not that it was my fault because I didn't know, but I do take responsibility for that because I should have, right? I should have. And that's just the last thing I want to say with keeping a team mindset. It's just bullying can happen anytime, anywhere. Just keep checking in with your players to make sure everybody's sinking in like a team. Okay. Now, make sure you grab your free guide, link below. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Hopefully this gave you some strategies to use when you're coaching different talent levels. I know that there's almost like a divide where this kid is like the next Shohei and then this kid is like can barely throw a ball. I know that's difficult. It's not an easy situation, but hopefully this video gave you some kind of pointers and tips to kind of, close that gap a little bit and kind of mold your team and be able to give your coaching to everybody while identifying all of these individual kid needs. Okay. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Grab your free guide, link below. I have a whole bunch of them down there. I made them for you for free to help you out in your baseball journey. So this is Coach Hart, Building Better Baseball. I will see you in another video real soon.